Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to ReBinge It. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're rewatching Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 10 already, Prime Factors. This episode aired March 20th, 1995.
Yep.
Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, Emanations?
No, it was perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. Let's go with that. Well, you have the notes this week, so
Indeed I do.
I'm going to sit back and see what happens.
We open on some banter in the mess hall between the Federation and the Marquis crews. They're actually talking about who's dating who, and it's all very lighthearted.
Mm-hmm.
And we get a lot of Seska in this scene, more than we've seen so far, I think. She's kind of getting introduced as an actual character through this whole episode.
Yeah, that's true. She's in this episode a lot. I mean, we've seen her a little bit. She was even in last week's episode. She was the transporter person. And then the week before, she was on the bridge. So maybe they're either they're trying to figure out where to put her, or she's a jack of all trades.
Oh, she's a Starfleet generalist.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose Marquis generalist.
Right.
The conversation comes around to Harry going on a date with one of the Delaney sisters. I don't know if we ever actually meet the Delaney sisters.
Why would there be sisters
Serving on the same ship. It's usually not a very good idea.
It's weird, yeah.
What happens if the ship gets destroyed? Both the sisters are killed.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly just there for the joke.
Yeah, I think so. On this date, Harry fell out of the gondola in the Venice simulation. There is much laughing, and people find it pretty funny. I also kind of like this as well, because we see here that Harry and B'Elanna are actually, becoming very good friends. As she says to Seska, "Oh, Harry would have told me about this."
They're pals.
Yeah, I kind of like that, of these two people with very different backgrounds, and they can actually be friends. That's very Star Trek.
Yeah, it's very Star Trek, and I like this moment, this sort of cute, light lunch talk, because it's realistic. Yeah. It is how you are at work. You do joke around with each other.
Right.
That was pretty good.
On the other side of the mess hall, Janeway and Tuvok can hear this, and Janeway is pretty happy that the crews are actually starting to get along. Tuvok remains completely implacable and delivers the killer line. That kind of bonding should improve performance and maximize efficiency. Wonderful.
Well, he's not wrong. It's a little creepy how Janeway is watching in the distance with this huge grin on her face. Like, she has no chill.
I did like it that the captain was actually eating with the crew.
Well, they're in her dining room now, remember?
That's true. Maybe that's a good point. They are actually eating in her dining room.
Yeah. So they're eating with her.
But I like the fact that she's doing that.
Yeah, and I like that she's sitting with Tuvok, because at the end of last week's episode, remember, Tuvok was sitting by himself.
Yes.
And Tom was like, you don't make a lot of friends doing that.
Maybe Tuvok is trying an experimentation of sitting with other people. If we'd listened to his podcast this week, he might have put something on there.
I can't remember what we decided the podcast was called. Was it just...
It's logical.
It's logical. Yeah, he probably got on there and said that Tom Paris told him, that he should probably have lunch with other people or interact more with other people, but he decided it was illogical and will continue to sit by himself at his own table. I bet Janeway sat down with him.
Yeah. Well, this happy scene is interrupted as Janeway is called to the bridge by a distress call, and we find a ship with a very brightly dressed and a very human-looking man telling them that they're putting out a distress call because Voyager is in distress. A very confused Janeway and Chakotay just look at each other with what is going on? And we go into the opening credits.
Yeah, and this guy was a sort of slime ball on As the World Turns, like in the 90s, probably around the time of this show, maybe a little bit before, actually. So I'm immediately suspicious.
We now get a quick space shot of a very cool-looking little ship flying alongside Voyager, and the guy on the view screen introduces himself as
Alien Slimeball.
Gatharel Laban of the planet Sikaris, and I believe he's wearing a leftover costume from Joseph's amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I do have a comment on his costume when we get a better look at it later.
He invites Janeway and Voyager to their planet to show them the hospitality of their people, and he'd like to come aboard as he has gifts for them. I don't know about you, but if I was Janeway and as soon as somebody says gifts, I'm like, I'll bring them on board. There's presents.
I mean, beware strange aliens offering mysterious gifts.
I'm pretty sure there's a Ferengi rule of acquisition that says that.
It probably says take the gift and sell it.
Ask for a gift receipt.
I mean, on Deep Space Nine, at least in the early seasons, we would have beamed the guy right to ops with a gift, and it probably would have been a bomb or a disease.
That's exactly what happened. Back to the mess hall, and Gath has brought some delicacies. Neelix is very impressed, as he's heard stories of Sikaris and their incredible hospitality.
Before the guy walks in, Neelix is like preparing for the lunch rush or something, and he licks his fingers. This is improper health and safety. Ugh.
Oh, there's going to be an F rating for food safety on the door of that place.
Well, and then this guy turns up with a couple of plates of food, and we just eat it. We don't even scan it. We don't do anything. Again, we are not being careful enough.
Has it been correctly refrigerated?
But here is where I got a good look at this guy's outfit, and it is ridiculous.
I know.
First, it's very low cut. I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be provocative, but it looks very funny.
He's going for that chest look.
Yes, and in complete Star Trek fashion, which is a bit of a pun, I guess, it's a sort of smock top, right? It's like long and very loose. Yeah. And then here, though, you get a look at the details, and it's really ugly. Like they have these different blocks of fabric, and there's this felt edging around the different blocks. In my notes, I wrote, this is not an outfit that breeds trust.
I thought it looked like it was excessively flamboyant.
Well, the colors are, because it's like really bright aqua. Yeah. Those are the sort of color blocks. And then it's got all these different colors in the other panels. Yeah. To me, it looks like something very handmade, like something he bought on Etsy. And not like the good parts of Etsy, dark Etsy. Is there a dark version?
Oh. Leaving the fashion aside for a moment, Garth explains how his people are well-traveled and came to hear of Voyager. He's there to invite them for a break, a vacation on his homeworld. And Janeway seems to be very much enjoying these snacks that he's brought.
Yes, and meanwhile, Tuvok is scowling behind her.
Yes, he's giving this great look. Do not trust this guy. I'll put 2 bars of latinum on this guy being a scumbag.
Yeah, Tuvok is really me in this episode, at least the first part.
Kes suggests to Janeway that the crew would welcome some shore leave. Her saying this makes me wonder if there was a plan with the character of Kes, that she would end up as a counselor. I know that her personal problems led to her basically leaving the show, but it seems like she's a character that really would fit kind of the Deanna Troi role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, plus she has some telepathy skills, although honestly, that would be annoying in counseling. Empathy would be better.
It feels like they're aiming for more for this character.
Yeah.
Voyager is now orbiting a green-blue world, and on the surface, Gath is giving Janeway the grand tour. And we see members of the crew hanging out and talking to the locals. And also, it looks like they sprung for costumes here, as all the Sikarans are wearing different outfits.
Oh, right. Although it does seem like we're back in the Pasadena shopping mall. But yes, there are more costumes. That is true. Now, in this scene, though, is when I first noticed the shoulder pads in this guy's outfit.
Oh. Gath seems to be very generous, offering to make Janeway an entire wardrobe of exotic fabrics, and doing so would give all of them a great deal of pleasure. I did notice something here. Seeing as we're focusing on Gath, I believe this may be the first recorded on-screen man bun in television history.
Oh, I didn't even notice his hair.
This may have been the catalyst, which restarted the fashion trend of the man bun. Forget David Beckham, Star Trek Voyager was the start of it.
Oh, it could be. This to me is like the second time they've fallen into this trap of Janeway. Like a few episodes ago, I complained about Neelix asking her about her lipstick. And here now she's really into these fabrics and how amazing they are. And he's talking about making her a dress. And she's like, oh, I'll just have a scarf. It's just a stereotype that this is what a woman would act like and would want. Every woman would act like and what they would want. When, is that what Picard would do? He was into antiquities, right? So a much more manly thing for someone to be into.
Oh, I think so, yeah. He could ask for a kilt, I suppose.
I just found it annoying.
Have you got any tartans?
Yes, please make me a dress. Hey. It's just very 90s that here's a woman, she must want to wear a dress.
I get your point, yeah. Harry, meanwhile, has met a young woman who is messing with what appears to be a musical instrument, but really it's a weather device. They start talking a bit of technobabble, and the two of them seem to immediately hit it off.
She seems surprised that he's not an idiot. I actually thought that was funny. She's like, oh, you know about things?
Are you like a scientist? We also meet another character here called Jarrett O'Tell, who Gath describes as his assistant. And Gath is really creepy here. He's very close to Janeway, and he's got his hand on her shoulder.
It's very handsy.
And when Garth leaves, she has this look on her face that's sort of like, this is a little creepy.
Yeah, I mean, are we really supposed to think that Janeway would find this charming and that she finds him attractive? Nonsense.
Okay, headcanon. I see this very much as her struggling with being the diplomat here. And it seems that she's uncomfortable in this situation, or at least ill at ease. After all, this is a first contact situation. And to an extent, maybe it is necessary for a crew to give them a break. So she's trying to be diplomatic. But at the same time, I catch this sense she's waiting for the penny to drop. Like, what's the catch here?
Well, except there's the lean-in scene later that I'm not so sure. But we can talk about that when we get there.
Onto a captain's log, and Janeway is reporting the crew is enjoying an evening on the planet, and the Sikaris are very hospitable. What she doesn't report is that Tom has not broken up any marriages, and there are 0 murder charges against him. So that's a win for this planet.
We barely see Tom in this episode.
On the surface, Harry is relaying their story to the young woman from the weather machine. She seems to really enjoy it and asks for permission to tell it to others, telling Harry that stories are an essential part of every person's being. So they seem to view storytelling and the narratives as like personal property. She then tells Harry she knows a private place where he can tell her more stories. And they jump onto a platform and are beamed to the planet Alastria. It's just before dawn, and she explains they are experiencing the Erosine wind, the passion wind, as she puts it.
The passion winds. Come on.
She puts her arms around Harry as the Alastrian suns are rising. And Harry makes me laugh here. It's like, can't you read the signs, dude?
Yeah.
She's really into you.
And he's just like, oh, this is weird. What's with the suns? What's with that? Yeah. I'm surprised that he never even considered that maybe they were on a holodeck or something.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think of that.
Because that's what I thought.
Well, Harry is much more interested in this planet than anything else. So kind of the opposite of Tom, I would think, in this situation. And the woman explains this planet is 40,000 light years from where they were. Harry tells her they have to get back. He needs to know everything about this platform. Back on Sikaris, Janeway is still at a party that Gath was throwing, and she's even in civilian clothes, so she's very relaxed.
Oh, she looks good in those clothes.
She seems to be enjoying herself, and even leans in to kiss Gath.
Yeah, this is what I mean, where it's not that she's not into it. Maybe Kate Mulgrew thought, no, this isn't right early on. So she was trying to show it.
Right.
But then they make the character think she's going to kiss this oily guy. I don't buy it.
Fortunately, Harry bursts in and interrupts. Harry is very excited and explains to Janeway that the platform is a space-folding transport device. Gath almost like nonchalantly says, oh, it's called a spatial trajector, which I think is an absolutely awesome name, by the way. Projector is boring.
Trajector.
This is a spatial trajector.
Got it.
I mean, I wonder if that means it results in tragedy most of the time.
Well, maybe at least during testing.
Janeway immediately jumps back into captain mode and asks if it's possible to modify their technology so Voyager could use it. And here comes the kicker. Gath explains they cannot share their technology because the risk of it falling into the wrong hands of those who would abuse it, and their laws strictly forbid that. The Prime Directive bites Voyager in the butt.
It's like looking in a mirror.
Garth then goes on a little bit of a sanctimonious rant about how breaking just one of their laws would undermine everything they believe in. I do like here how the actor, Ronald Guttman, with 134 IMDb credits, just displays this really great attitude of almost bored indifference. Like, this is so tedious to explain. I really thought he did a good job fleshing out this Garth character.
Yeah, he's a natural at playing oily.
He did a great job. Well, Harry and Janeway look pretty crestfallen, and Janeway just delivers this really stern look. I kind of like that. On board Voyager, the senior staff are meeting, and B'Elanna explains it would take 40 years off their journey, and if they could use it twice, they'd be back in Federation space. Janeway laments this is the first time they've been on the other side of the fence, meaning the Prime Directive. And I suppose that would be true maybe for her, but we've seen a lot of races in Star Trek that have technology way beyond the Federation, even back to like the Squire of Gothos.
Oh, you mean that guy who was the original Q?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And he didn't seem to want to share the technology. So I guess this is just a personal thing for Janeway, that it's the first time she's actually been on this side of the divide.
I think so, yes. I really like this scene where they're in the conference room because they're like close up on Janeway with her crew arguing behind her while she's just sitting there going, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
And the discussion that goes on behind Janeway is actually pretty good because Chakotay talks about he knows Federation personnel have ignored the Prime Directive because of ethical objections.
Yes.
And Harry, I thought, was great because he delivers this really dogmatic explanation, ending with, it does more good than harm. And I thought it was a nice touch of Harry, the new, freshly minted Starfleet officer, not having ever had to experience that. Well, if we don't do something, maybe all these people will die. You know, we can't sit back behind the Prime Directive and go, I can't do anything.
Right. I mean, the Prime Directive it's annoying and it's a plot device.
Yeah, very true.
You know, and when you think about it really carefully, you realize it's stupid. I mean, it makes sense in specific situations, but I guess the trouble is you can't put all that nuance into the description. So you just say, oh, never. You can't ever do that.
Right. What is it you always say, Kim? If we like him, then we'll break it.
Exactly. That happened a lot on Deep Space Nine. It didn't matter if we liked the people or if it somehow was affecting us personally.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, because that whole episode with Dax.
Oh, like Cisco trying to destroy the foundation of Trill society.
Exactly.
Tuvok, maybe naturally, is the voice of reason here, or perhaps the voice of logic, bringing up that it may be that no is simply a prelude to negotiation.
And later on the podcast, he's like, had another meeting where everybody was being ridiculous. I was the only one who was logical.
There was far too much emotion on display.
I mean, in the early days, he would have really been hard on everything Harry did and said. But he seems to have backed off on Harry.
Right. Well, I think maybe because Harry is pretty much quoting the official line. It's almost down to quoting the rule book at him. And I could see the Vulcan going, excellent, quoting the rule book. Good job.
Yeah.
Harry suggests, because the Sicarians value stories, they could try trading their database of literature in exchange for the Sikaran technology. Janeway is down with this idea and plans to meet with Gath. B'Elanna wants to get a look at the projector platform and see if she can figure anything out. But Janeway nixes the idea, telling her they should not do anything that might violate their canon of laws. Do you think that's fair?
Well, no, because does Oily G tell Janeway why they don't allow others to have their technology? Is it for the same reason as the Prime Directive?
Well, he said specifically they didn't want it falling into the hands of people who could abuse it.
So I would say in that scenario, if it's about how advanced a culture is, if the culture has the ability to scan and reverse engineer it, and you invited them there, that's on you.
Interesting.
You can't stop them from using their own technology.
Right.
So, yeah, I do think she's a bit too much by the book in this episode.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think that, you're right. If they could scan it and the underlying technology is understandable by Federation people, I would say that would be probably okay.
It's fair game. You invited them there.
Yes.
And you're not shielding them from being able to use their technology.
Precisely.
So.
But at the same time, I would worry that you could end up with a situation like, remember when Miles on Deep Space Nine, where he asked just some innocuous questions about a race's technology and ended up being thrown in jail for 20 years or whatever it was. I could see that from Janeway's perspective of they might look, even at B'Elanna using her tricorder and just scanning it, as some kind of espionage. So I can understand her caution.
Well, yeah,
But she doesn't give a justification for why she says that.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I would say I don't want you going down to the planet and scanning it because that is one step too far. But whatever you can see from the ship, to me, seems like fair game.
Oh, yeah. If you can do it non-invasively.
Right. Yeah, that's the nuance to me.
After everyone leaves, B'Elanna seems a little bit down. And for a change, it's Harry reassuring her, telling her that he's sure Janeway will get the technology. We've seen B'Elanna in the past try and pick Harry up, and he's doing the same thing. And at the same time, it's kind of funny seeing Harry having this real faith in Janeway.
I mean, I also like the fact that it's a man and a woman who have this kind of a friendship and relationship.
Yes.
Sort of a work relationship where you're picking each other up, but you're great work friends. Because that's very realistic. I mean, I've been a woman in engineering jobs for a long time, and I have worked at many places where I am the only woman there. And you do build friendships with people because you have to. And, they don't all end up romantic. So I like I like this. I think it's a realistic relationship. And I like how they show it.
Well, it reminds me of one of my cosplay friends that I build with.
Are you saying that you talk to other women?
No,
it's a cat. The other person is a cat.
On Sikaris, Janeway is introducing Gath to pecan pie. Although I think your name of Oily G. That's a great name. Yeah.
Well, what a stupid name.
I think I'm going to have to stick with that. Yeah. However, Gath isn't budging. Janeway goes with Plan B, offering him the literature database, and he's just being creepy again. He touches her face, telling her he needs to meet with the other magistrates first, but he wants to finish his pecan pie before that.
Yeah, he's giving you the runaround.
Although I would have suggested mince pies. If she started with mince pies, he'd agreed immediately.
I mean, do they not have any writers on their planet? This is strange to me.
Okay, headcanon.
Okay.
I was going to leave this to overanalysis. I think the problem is they're all basically lazy. They're all interested in experiencing things, enjoying the finer things in life. And they're not creative. They are purely consumers. They don't have the ability to create.
I wonder if there's an underbelly of this society that we don't see.
Well, this is what I was wondering. I'm wondering if their society has become so automated. They're almost Q-like in some ways. If they can just make things happen. So you end up with this society that strays away from science and learning and literally becomes a society where they're only interested in pleasure and having fun and eating pecan pie. And they've literally lost the ability to tell stories and invent their own literature because it requires effort.
They've done the thing that people talk about all the time, that everybody's just gotten lazy because they don't have to work.
This I see as technology has advanced to the point where they don't need to do any of these things.
Yeah, because their needs are met.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a different version of what Roddenberry claims humans evolved to.
Right. Yeah. It's like if you give people the ability to live to their fullest, some people could be writers, some people could play sports. You could end up with a society where everybody is living to their full potential, which is like the Roddenberry theory.
Right. Or you could end up with this.
And this is if you like almost the dark side of it.
Yeah.
They just become obsessed with enjoyment.
This is sort of a better version of Ryza, really.
Oh, yes. Well, you're not sexually exploiting the locals for a start.
Because I always thought Ryza was so stupid, yeah. Anyway.
In engineering, B'Elanna is talking to Seska, who is completely distracted and totally ignores her. When she snaps out of it, she starts telling B'Elanna a story about how she planned to meet her brother on his birthday this year. Well, this sets B'Elanna off, and she begins investigating how the projector works, telling Seska that the space folding may leave a subspace residue, and hypothesizes it uses a neutrino bubble. Casey, the assistant chief engineer and former punching bag of B'Elanna.
Oh, right.
Well, he overhears and starts adding to the theory, telling B'Elanna, I'm with you on this, as it doesn't hurt to theorize. And then all of them start working on it. I thought this was a nice example of following the letter of an order, but not the spirit of it.
We've all done that. This scene, I think, is really the beginning of them showing us Seska is trouble.
Yes. Yeah.
In the way she speaks to B'Elanna, the kinds of things she says. She also sort of disparages the captain because she says, oh, she's too busy being in love with whatever that guy's name is, Oily G.
Yep.
And which, by the way, this is an example of why the captain shouldn't be doing stuff like that in front of the crew. Because then they do start to think, oh, well, now your lead is compromised.
Right.
You know, like Captain Kirk.
On Sikaris, Harry is meeting with the young woman from earlier, and we learn her name is Udana. She's taking him to a clandestine meeting with Garth's assistant, Jarrett Otel. Otel offers Harry the matrix of the projector in return for the literature database, which he says will give him great prestige. He delivers some good lines here as well, saying, rules should be flexible enough to meet the needs of the moment. So much about all that pontificating about the sanctity of the canon of their laws. And if just one is violated, everything goes to pot.
Well, that guy is full of himself, Oily G.
Oh, yeah.
He's found a position of self-importance, and he's very comfortable in it.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes, I like that. Jarrett goes on to tell Harry that Gath has no intention of helping them leave Sikaris. Harry is meeting with B'Elanna, Seska, and Tom, and telling them about the offer, knowing that Janeway wouldn't go for it. He says he's going to see the captain, and, perhaps quite shockingly here, Tom advises him to tell her everything he knows, and let her take it from here. Was that not surprising? I think it's starting to show Tom is putting his faith in Janeway.
Yeah, and the implication is that B'Elanna is starting to as well, right?
Yeah. After they leave, Seska tells B'Elanna they need to take matters into their own hands. They could take the technology and get everyone halfway home. B'Elanna isn't swayed, but is clearly considering it. This goes back to your point that you start seeing Seska is a bit of an issue here.
Yeah, she is a bad influence. And she uses sort of emotional blackmail on B'Elanna.
Yes.
Right, like, this isn't you. You're not acting like yourself.
Oh, my brother, I was going to see him, meet him for his birthday. Harry is now briefing Janeway and Tuvok. And Kate Mulgrew is in full stern mode. She's got her hands on her hips, this, very serious expression. This is all very serious. Janeway thinks this may muddy things, but it does mean she'll force the issue with Gath.
Oily G.
Janeway asks Tuvok for his opinion and sums it up nicely with, "You're dealing with a man who may have his own agenda, who is willing to defy his own laws." And then, in a wonderful piece of Vulcan, you can justify anything with logic, he points out that if they deal with Jarrett, then it is his laws that are being compromised, not ours.
I really like that. I thought, what a great logical line. I mean, the Vulcans can be quite edgy.
Very much so. Strictly speaking, it is true. But is there a moral responsibility here? Because there's a line, and I can't remember where it came from, might have been Game of Thrones, where one of the characters says, "I was a smuggler. I didn't steal anything. It was the pirates that stole the stuff."
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like, well, that's kind of like fencing it. So even though you're not the thief, are you morally responsible for the thief's actions if you're benefiting from it?
Right.
Janeway's response is that there are standards and principles that she is expected to uphold, and how does she not compromise them? It's great the way she's sort of struggling with this, of how do you do the right thing for your crew versus the right thing as a captain, as a representative of both the Federation and Starfleet values. Yeah. Tuvok's sage advice is, if there's any chance Gath will come through, they've got to keep with that approach.
This is such an interesting scene. And I mean, everything kind of from here, I think, is very interesting.
Yes.
And it strikes me as strange that Janeway wouldn't consider compromising her own principles in the face of what's going on, because of the lives of so many people that she is meant to protect.
Right.
And without support out here in the Delta Quadrant, without a guarantee of where their resources are going to come from, they're in a really dangerous situation.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not sure I buy that she wouldn't be willing to at least consider, and I guess she sort of does, but not, they don't talk about it. Like, it really should be her senior staff. We should be having a discussion. It shouldn't involve Harry. It shouldn't involve B'Elanna, right? It probably just should be Chakotay and Tuvok, and the three of them ought to be talking about it. Here's the situation. Should we be compromising our principles here to get us home?
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I look at it, yeah.
I find that fascinating because we're getting into my overanalysis here, which is great. I looked at this as, this is the Janeway Picard moment. Picard, there is no way Picard would sacrifice his principles. And Janeway is a captain cut from the same cloth. She is not prepared to compromise even for her crew. Not at this stage in the show anyway. I think this fits really nicely with the level of captain that she is.
I would agree, except for...
Yes.
We're talking about the lives of her entire crew.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying, where I feel like this is different, but that's just me.
Yeah.
And maybe season 1 Picard, but season 7 Picard or Picard from the show Picard, I don't think
Really?
he does that. Yeah.
Maybe it's me reading it wrong, but I would see there was things he wouldn't compromise on. And maybe this would be one of them. But,
I mean, maybe. Yeah.
I'm going to add onto this another headcanon, maybe overanalysis. So, do you think Sisko would be home by now?
Yeah. I feel like, yes, Sisko would be home by now.
And we know Sisko would have got Garak to obtain the device.
And then pretended like he knew nothing about it. Pretended like he was outraged.
Outraged. Mr. Garak, I'm going to confine your quarters for the next 20 minutes.
Yep. I also think that moment in Caretaker, the captains also may have behaved differently.
Yeah.
I mean, they forced the issue to stay in that quadrant, and they wanted it to be the captain's decision so that there could be these moments of conflict, in particular with the Maquis crew.
Yeah, that has to become a story point.
Yep.
Well, as we expect, Garth is giving Janeway the runaround, saying he hasn't talked to the magistrates, so there's no decision on helping them yet. She explains how the crew is eager to continue their journey, and Garth is almost dismissive. He is full oily G right now.
Yeah, he's a jerk in this scene.
Yeah. And he says, why are you so consumed with the desire to get home? He invites them to stay and to extract pleasure from every moment. And he really badly continues hitting on her, even taking her hand and kissing it at one point.
Ew.
Janeway's not fooled by any of this, asking how long would this really last? She's seen how quickly they get bored, and what only really interests them is the new and unexplored. She says how permanence is more important to her, and Garth tries telling her that they'll lose those notions if they stayed. Then Janeway drops the bombshell. That's why we have to leave. Garth is shocked, describing her take as an attack on his beliefs, and saying, it's very upsetting, not at all pleasurable. He is great here. Like you said, this guy gets what Garth is. And he comes off as this petulant child. And seriously, I was having real sort of flashbacks to the Squire of Gothos. They've got all this power, they've got this ability, and they're sort of spoiled children.
Right. You're my plaything. You're not allowed to make your own decision. You should do what I say. When you don't behave how I want you to, well, you should just leave.
And coming from what I said earlier, I do feel Janeway was walking this line in diplomacy. And now she's sort of having to be forced, or she'd already, I think, come to this realization, but having to basically force the issue with these people of, they're not really what they pretend to be. They're not gracious hosts. They're not friends. They're all about themselves. And Voyager is just the latest novelty item for them.
Which is why you should go and scan that technology and steal it and get the hell out of there.
Right, yeah. Get Harry and B'Elanna scanning it.
Well, if they were really empathetic to their plight, they would have wanted to help them, or they would have actually hidden that technology from them if they weren't going to be willing to share it. They would have done something to sort of change their interaction, but they don't care. And Oily G is the perfect face of this attitude.
Yes, he really is. Well, Garth goes full pouty, calling her hostile and vicious. Yes. You must leave immediately.
Leaves in a huff. What a baby.
I think here we see the very real problem, because Janeway states, you never intended to help us. And he says, of course we did. He did everything in his power to persuade them to stay.
Yeah, that was how he was going to help.
Right, talk about cross purposes. I really enjoyed this scene because I thought it really sort of exposed what these people were, how they thought. And Janeway basically coming to the end of that diplomatic thread and going, we're done here.
Right.
Thinking about it, there was one kind of hint about how they get bored with things quickly. Because I think, remember, there's a scene where Janeway's walking with him and the woman brings up some of the fabrics again. And he's like, oh, no, we've seen that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
There's one little hint about that.
Yeah. Oh, these are all old news.
So I think maybe we were given an indication that they are very frivolous.
I guess so.
Yeah. On Voyager, they're starting to bring back the away teams and preparing to leave. Tuvok asks if Janeway is considering Jarrett's offer, and she just says she wishes she could, but cannot. Meanwhile, Seska, B'Elanna, and Carey are all plotting. They've downloaded the Federation library, and B'Elanna isn't convinced they should trade with Jarrett. But Seska and Kerry both are making a very good case. There's a lot more emotional appeals here as well.
Yes.
Kerry is also pretty sure they could just keep using the trajector and jump all the way home. It finally works, and B'Elanna's heard enough, saying, "Okay, let's do it." In the transporter room, these three stooges are attempting to beam down to the surface, but Kerry is locked out and can't override. But before they can send Seska down, in walks Tuvok. So if they were locked out, how could they operate the transporter?
Well, it wasn't that they were locked out from using it. They were trying to, hide it.
Oh!
Because...
Okay, I totally missed that.
Because Seska said she'd beam down and B'Elanna's like, "You'll get caught." And she goes, "I don't care."
Yeah.
Because she didn't
They
care.
were just trying to override security protocols. Okay.
Correct, yes. A lot happens in the last 5 minutes of this episode.
Well, Tuvok figured it out, and he installed additional security protocols on the transporter, and he tells a shocked B'Elanna he will be making the exchange with Jarrett Hotel. Seska has this awesome look on her face as he walks past. It's like a real, what?
Yeah, that was a stone cold Tuvok moment.
Yes.
That could be the name of his podcast.
Oh, Stone Cold. No, wasn't that a wrestler? Tuvok tells the others to go back to their stations and prepare the ship for the Matrix, and he beams down. In engineering, Seska is really starting to freak out because it's taking too long. Then Tuvok arrives with the trajector. He tells B'Elanna do not use it until he has spoken to the captain.
Oh, if only they'd listened.
Yeah. Well, here we see more of the problem with Seska, as she wants to basically use it immediately. And B'Elanna has to almost get in her way to force her to just run a test simulation.
It's so funny to me that they walk in with that giant device and they just happen to have a compatible place to plug it in. That really cracked me up. Here's a giant plug that it fits into. It just happens to be right here on the main console.
Headcanon here.
Yeah.
I assume that because they had that whole docking device for it, Jarrett must have provided some details or schematics so they could build this interface.
Yeah, you could be right
so
about that.
He gave them some information, basically to try and get them to do this deal.
Yeah, I get it. I'll accept that answer.
Also, I'm going to point out that this is a great piece of industrial design here, because if you notice, the unit has two little prongs coming out of it, and one is actually wider than the other, so there's no way you'd plug it in the wrong way around. That's a very sensible design choice there. Good job.
Okay.
Well, they start the simulation, and there's a lot of technobabble, but basically, the tetrahedral quartz mantle of the planet acts as an amplifier to the trajector, and they realize that if they leave orbit, they lose the ability to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Dun, dun, dun. The time crunch is on, and they're all starting to panic, and Seska is in full freak-out mode. Janeway's not helping by telling B'Elanna they need to leave orbit. She throws a little interference at Janeway, making excuses about phase variances, and the three stooges turn on the trajector. Janeway's body language here on the bridge is awesome. It's a complete, oh, what the freaking hell now?
Yes.
Buckle up, Janeway, it's going to get worse. Things start off going well, and they're almost at full strength. And then Seska, and I blame her for all of this,
yes,
commits the most fatal mistake. She announces out loud, it's going to work.
It's like in a horror movie when someone says, "I'll be right back." No, you won't.
Soon as you say it's going to work,
yeah,
that is literally throwing caution in the face of fate and screaming, do your worst, I dare you.
I couldn't figure out why they kept panicking. I mean, they realize that they need something to do with the planet.
Yes.
But it's like, you can leave orbit and come back once you figure out how it works.
Or look for another planet with it.
Yeah, I just thought they went into, like you said, the Three Stooges, they just went into chaos mode and were running around and engineering
exactly. That is so what I was thinking of with this.
It was a total panic.
Things are now starting to become unstable as the plasma manifolds are being bombarded with anti-neutrinos caused by the folding field. They can't compensate, and on the bridge, Harry reports, we're headed for a warp core breach.
Uh-oh.
As engineering starts getting filled with steam or smoke, they can't shut down the Matrix. And of course, it's fused to the base.
Of course.
Kerry evacuates, and B'Elanna tries pulling the trajector Matrix out, but it's not budging. And then, taking a leaf from Major Kira's playbook, B'Elanna gets a phaser and shoots the Matrix, destroying it. Seska reports the core temperatures are dropping as a completely deflated B'Elanna drops into a chair and has figured out that the anti-neutrinos mean this technology will never be compatible with Federation technology.
I need to message that science person who works for Star Trek and ask them if anti-neutrinos is a real thing.
Yes, they are particles that are utterly opposed to neutrinos.
Okay. They carry little signs.
Yes, down with neutrinos.
Yep. Oh my God.
Do you think anybody on the planet is monitoring this? Hey, somebody's trying to use the trajector.
No, they don't care. They're very busy having cocktails.
Yeah, it's probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon somewhere. They're having margaritas.
Right.
Seska now starts trying to destroy the logs of what happened, saying, they're not going to take the blame for this. But B'Elanna stops her, saying, but we're going to. And we get a good speech here from B'Elanna saying that they disobeyed orders, gambled and lost, and she's going to take the blame so that she can live with herself. Seska is surprised by this, telling B'Elanna, you've changed. And in a very good burn, B'Elanna replies, if that's true, I take it as a compliment. B'Elanna is great here. I love the way she sort of deflates and then is like, yeah, I'm going to take the blame for this. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to try and destroy the logs and pretend, you didn't know what was going on. She's completely ready to face the consequences.
Well, this is the moment we realize B'Elanna is Starfleet.
Huh. You're right.
Yep.
This is.
Mm-hmm. But I did really like Seska immediately trying to cover it up. I thought that was great for her character.
Oh, yeah.
And, really fitting with everything that had happened so far. And it makes a lot of sense that a Starfleet person wouldn't have done that. But it makes sense that she would have. I thought it was a really good moment.
That's a really good point. It is showing the different paths that these two have gone on. Seska, she is still not a member of the crew. She's not a member of this team.
Not willingly.
Yes.
And also, meanwhile, the third stooge, Lieutenant Carey, he evacuated. He's like, this isn't my problem or my fault. I'm out of here.
B'Elanna did tell him to get the people out.
Yes.
Carey was at least following orders.
Right.
After he got out, he went, I don't know what was happening. It was all those two's fault. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, it's time for the reckoning. B'Elanna is taking full responsibility in front of Janeway. But Tuvok steps in, saying he was the senior officer involved. He did the exchange for the trajector. Janeway is just shocked. She is obviously also furious, telling B'Elanna, you've really disappointed me.
Oh.
Yeah.
The worst.
Right. She gives her a pass, but warns her any further transgressions and she'll no longer be an officer.
Yeah.
I think the first part of that would be just the most stinging rebuke for B'Elanna.
Yeah.
She now turns to Tuvok, asking how of all people could he be involved? And I absolutely love this explanation. Tuvok says, I did it for you because he knew she couldn't. He also tells her, I accept the consequences of my actions. I expect to lose my commission and be court-martialed when we return to Federation space. Janeway tells him, I need you. You are my counsel. You are the one I turn to when I need my moral compass checked. We have forged this relationship over the years and I depend on it. Brilliantly delivered. You can just really feel what she's saying in this.
Yeah. Yep.
She does accept he made a sacrifice, but it's not one she would have allowed him to make. She also states that you can use logic to justify everything. That's its strength and its flaw. Thank you, Janeway. I think we've all come to that conclusion by now.
Mm-hmm. But a little bit of that is true with the Prime Directive as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finally, in full, don't push me any further mode, Janeway tells him, in future, bring your logic to me. Don't act on it behind my back. Tuvok gives her his word and says, my logic was not in error, but I was.
Mm-hmm.
That almost sounds like a Vulcan apology.
Well, he said he was in error.
Yes.
Yeah.
After Tuvok leaves, we close on Janeway just putting her head in her hands and pulling them down her face. Well, and she gives a look of, what the hell is going on? Could this get any worse?
Kate Mulgrew is really good just in that moment with her facial expression because she's also got just the tiniest bit of grin on her face, just a little bit of a smile, and then she's like, oh my God. I really like that. I seem to remember Picard doing something similar in one or more episodes.
Oh, yes, he definitely has.
Mm-hmm.
The end. That bit at the end when she puts her hands up is one of those best unspoken, these freaking people.
Yeah.
It's like the visual version of, do you remember Chakotay in episode 3 where he says, "You've turned this into one lousy day for me," to B'Elanna?
Yeah, it was kind of similar to that.
This is the visual version of that.
Even when she's delivering the message to B'Elanna, she, with her face, is showing compassion and that she cares and that she almost feels bad about having to say what she's saying.
Yeah.
So she's managing to show that she cares, but she still delivers a very stern, serious message.
Right.
And that's good leadership. That's just good acting. This whole end scene, I just thought was great. I really loved how it ended.
Well, I also liked how there's an element of anger with this.
Oh, absolutely.
That she's keeping... that she's doing that thing she's done before where you can see she's keeping it under control. I
have some things in Leadership Corner about that last moment and why I think she sort of switched from anger to something else at the end of the scene.
Oh, okay.
Well, before we get there, let's talk about your over-analysis.
Do we want to talk about Tuvok first?
Sure.
Okay. I think this is absolutely the classic piece of Vulcan here.
Yeah, he really talked himself into what he was doing.
Yes,
yep.
Because maybe this should be Janeway's leadership corner, but I think Janeway actually made a mistake here. She's been working with him for a long time. She understands Vulcans, and she even made the statement about how you can use logic to justify anything. If you know Vulcans and logic and their behavior, you would know the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And a Vulcan take on this, if it costs me my career to save this entire ship, all these people, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to find a logical way of explaining that. Because it's their way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel Janeway missed the command decision here of when we found out about all this, of turning to Tuvok and going, "I am not allowing you to do this. That's a direct order." Because if you know Vulcans, you'll know they'll take that approach.
Well, especially based on what he said. Because he said, well, we'd be violating his laws, not ours.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that was good because that should be Tuvok's role in this, to explore the other ideas for the captain, maybe.
Yes, but you should discuss them and decide what to do together, which is the part that he's like, oh no, she is, she can't compromise her principles, so I am supposed to do it.
Right.
Yep.
I think that, though, you would know that about Vulcans, and she should have stopped that. She should have said, I know you're going to do this because needs of the many. Do you think she missed that there?
Well, I have a different theory about what sort of went wrong there, which I will cover in Leadership Corner. But I think your point is valid, that she should have maybe considered that, and maybe she will from now on. And that thing that happened in the Eye of the Needle episode, where Tuvok kept information from everyone until after that Romulan had left. And then he was like, oh, by the way, that guy died 4 years ago.
Right.
If he had shared that sooner, we could have done something different. So he made a decision there, and we ignored it. And I think if we really were not so episodic, she could have taken that as a learning into the future and been like, wait a minute, I need to double check your so-called logic.
Right.
Yeah. But I also think that from a leadership standpoint, you need to be able to trust the people who report to you. So I really related to what she said at the end, which is like, I have to be able to talk to you.
Yeah.
That's the only way that we're going to work well together. So I appreciated that part of the little scene there.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that was a bit of a miss on Janeway's part.
I'll give you that. And then I'll give you a little more color in a few minutes.
Okay, next thing.
Yeah.
Jarrett's plan here was to get all these stories, and it would help him with his stature on the planet.
Yeah, whatever.
Isn't anyone going to ask where these came from?
Well, they could just say we got it from Voyager. Doesn't have to say we traded it for something.
Oh, we stole it. Didn't break our laws.
All right.
Next thing. Sticking with Jarrett, is there a chance he sabotaged the trajector?
I did wonder that, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because how does it hurt him? It doesn't.
He doesn't care. He's got what he wanted.
He didn't care. Yeah. I mean, he certainly could have.
Right.
He's the one that turned those neutrinos bad or whatever it was that happened.
He encouraged people to be anti-neutrino.
That's right.
Next thing. Do you think they made a good scan of that device before they plugged it in and blew it up?
Should have stuck it in the 3D printer and printed a couple of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Scan the thing, figure out how it works. I mean, in theory, there must be other planets with this quartz mantle.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're flying home, you got plenty of time to look for him.
Yeah, the Three Stooges really blew it with that thing.
Yeah.
If they had just listened to Tuvok, or if they had just been like, oh, let's quick replicate it before Tuvok comes back.
Right.
Or at least
Start scanning it, yeah.
Yeah, anything. But they just, they let Seska lead them down a dark path and they couldn't get out of it.
And what's annoying as well, the captain's has a science background. So you'd have 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
And Tuvok's already shown that there's hidden depths to him, like when he knew all the brain science.
And you do it carefully. You sort of slowly work on it quietly in the background. And then at some point you're like, I had this idea from that folding space thing. Here's what I'm thinking. But, I need some input.
Captain, I read some sensor readings and we've pretty much figured it out and we have a fully working device.
I mean, you've got to learn.
We didn't really trade the database, just B'Elanna's kind of smart.
I mean, you've got to learn to manipulate people. It's a very important skill.
Well, it's also funny as well because, 2 weeks ago we had the wormhole episode and they kept on using the test cylinders again. And this one's like, we're not going to test anything. We're just going to go for it, the whole ship.
Yep, that's right.
But yeah, the problem was Tuvok gave it to the Three Stooges. In some ways, he should have held on to it until he talked to the captain.
Well, he knows now that he can't trust those Stooges.
That's true. He was,
Or at least he can only trust B'Elanna.
Yeah. But B'Elanna was so easily swayed.
I don't think she will be next time, but yes, she was.
I wonder if some of that comes from the fact that they were marquee together.
Oh, yeah.
They probably had their life on the line more than once. So there's that residual inertia, if you like, of B'Elanna trusting Seska. Seska can kind of rely on pushing B'Elanna in the direction she wants.
Well, I think there's an implication they were good friends before, and B'Elanna didn't care about blurred lines then.
Right.
This reminds me, I hadn't thought about it, it's not in my notes, but it reminds me when I was coming up through management, I guess there was a time when I was promoted, and one of my work friends was sort of continuing on the same exact path that we had been on before, where we would do things together and we would maybe be negative about other people. It would be mostly be in jest, a little bit of gossip and things like that. But when I got promoted, I couldn't do that anymore. That was not something that she really understood and I think really maybe hurt her, that I had to step back from that. But I took my job in leadership very seriously, and I didn't want to behave in a way that was inappropriate for the role because of how important I think leadership is. And it just sort of reminded me of it here while we were talking about Seska and how she's pulling on the past relationship that she had with B'Elanna.
What's really interesting when you can relate this stuff to real experiences.
Any other overanalysis?
I think we talked about all my other overanalysis points and headcanon in the episode.
Well, my only overanalysis point that we didn't talk about is that based on how many chances we've had to get home in just the first 10 episodes, I'd say this is no biggie. We run into opportunities every other week.
Hey, we're out here for like a few weeks and we find a wormhole and we find a planet with space folding technology. Yeah. I'm thinking another month we'll get straight to it. Yeah.
Well, I'll move to women in the future. Just a couple of topics here. First, I did feel like they were really painting Janeway as gullible. And I don't like that. Although I thought it was interesting that you didn't think she was being gullible, that she was sort of making faces about him. Yeah. But I would have believed that if it hadn't been for the scene where she was going to kiss him. It's like, I don't think so. So that I didn't like.
Yeah, odd story choice there.
Agreed. I do really like the edge on Seska. We should by no means have only good guy energy with the women characters, so I like that. And I really like the way they portrayed B'Elanna getting pulled into it. You know, she was resistant, but not too resistant. It's like she thought maybe she could talk Seska into thinking the same way that she was thinking, but it didn't work. And then Seska sort of using a little bit of emotional blackmail, reminding her of what she used to be.
Well, I think that's maybe part of the tragedy here of you seeing these two people on different paths.
They're on different paths. That's exactly the struggle that she was having, because B'Elanna has what she really wanted was to be in Starfleet, but she couldn't temper that Klingon energy, right, that she had inside of her. And so now she's got the opportunity, but yet her friends are still sort of pulling at her heartstrings and just sort of pulling on loyalty.
Oh, yeah, right. That's
and it. So she's struggling. Yeah. It was also cool how they threw Lieutenant Carey in there to just confuse her. Like, wait, what do you mean he agrees with Seska?
Yeah.
I thought that, I don't know, I thought that whole part of the story was really very good.
Agreed.
All right, let's go to Janeway's leadership corner.
Okay.
Did Janeway give Tuvok a reason to behave the way he did?
Oh.
That's, to me, the real question.
Wow. I'm going to say no, because I think a fundamental cultural, societal norm of the Vulcans is the needs of the many concept, voiced by Spock. And the writing of Tuvok, I think, is very much in line with real classic Vulcan. I see, if you like, an oversight on Janeway's part that Tuvok would go there given the opportunity, because it's logical.
I know that's the way you see it, but I'm now going to give you a totally nerdy or geeky, I think it's a geeky, leadership reason for what happened.
Okay.
There's some really tough lessons to learn in leadership. I think I've made that pretty clear in all of the podcasting that we've done. But when you build these great bonds of loyalty with people,
yes,
they want to do anything for you. They will naturally gravitate towards protecting you. And that can be good, but that can also be a curse.
Mm-hmm.
I may have told this story on the Deep Space Nine podcast. I don't remember, but I experienced this where I had a particular look on my face in a meeting. Like we were sitting in a meeting and someone who reports to me, or I think actually reported to a manager who reported to me, was sitting across the table from me in a meeting. And I was not even paying attention in this meeting. I was texting with you because we were trying to sell a house and things were going wrong and it was difficult and I was getting annoyed at what was going on. And I was not paying attention in this meeting, but the person sitting across from me was paying very close attention to the look on my face. He decided that I was really unhappy with what was going on in this meeting, and he went off and took a whole course of action based on the expression on my face. We never talked about it. I didn't know anything about it until a long time later, because then I asked him, why in the heck did you do this when what we had decided was to do that? And he told me, well, remember in that meeting? And he started describing it to me. And I'm sitting there going, I have no idea what this person is talking about.
Yeah.
And I had to really rack my brain and think back, what was going on? I don't even remember that meeting. And then it dawned on me. Oh my God, I wasn't even paying attention. I was not part of the conversation, but I was making a face because I was annoyed about something else. This had a real impact on him. He wanted to protect me, do what I wanted, even though that's not what I agreed to in the meeting. It's not what really happened. But he took it upon himself because he felt such a bond of loyalty to me. And now, look, that bond of loyalty is a great thing when you need something from someone and you ask them to do it and they do it, right?
Yeah.
This is what I work really hard to build with the people who are on my teams, because I don't want to work at places where that's not important. That's just the kind of leader I want to be, and it's the kind of team I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
But it has a dark side. So I really was thinking about this when I got to the end of this episode.
Yeah.
Because Tuvok was like, oh, you can't compromise your principles, but I can. I can protect you. So when he said that little speech about, you've made it clear that you want to do anything to get them home, but you can't compromise your principles, I clicked into that like, oh,
yeah,
she may have not like given him hints in the moment that he should do that, but he really has felt like it's completely his job based on the type of relationship that she's worked hard to build.
Yeah.
So he felt like he was doing the right thing.
Interesting.
There's always a dark side to stuff, right? To like strengths-based management, the strengths all have a dark side. To me, this is an example of a dark side to a thing that's really great.
Yeah.
So that's the way I was looking at it when you said, what, did she miss something about him just being a Vulcan? I'm like, I don't know. I think it could have been this other thing.
Yeah. She was missing the fact that he could look at it as a loyalty issue.
I mean, he said it.
Well, yes, he did.
Basically, right? You said this is what you wanted, and I did it because you wouldn't.
Because you couldn't do it.
Now, somebody who doesn't have a really strong bond with her and doesn't feel that sense of loyalty, someone like, I don't know, Seska, no, someone else, right? Seska's maybe not a good example because she would have done anything to get off of there. But
Tom, maybe.
Somebody else like Harry Kim, he wouldn't have done that.
No, he would have followed the captain's
because
orders.
He doesn't have that bond yet with her.
Interesting.
And she's got 4 years with Tuvok.
Yeah, that is one very good interpretation of what was happening there.
It's the leadership corner interpretation. And, that's a deep cut of leadership. And I'm not sure the people who write this have enough experience in that in that world. But I just felt like I related to that, and I saw that look on her face. And, it's
a very good point, though. I mean, it boils down to he is loyal to his captain, and he sees the captain cannot do something that will compromise their principles. Therefore, I can do it without the captain compromising, and I will take the blame.
I'll take the fall. Exactly.
But I'll also add the way he said his logic was correct, but he was not. I see that as the logic is needs of the many.
Okay.
Where he was incorrect, it was disobeying Janeway, who is his colleague, who is his captain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which I think would be a bad idea with Vulcans. Let's just say that. I think Vulcan morality is a little different.
It's edgy. I know. Yeah. It's not right. Yeah. But you can't do Chakotay either because he's holier than thou. You need somebody in the middle.
Yeah. Tom.
Tom.
Now, you said if I help you with this, Captain, you'll get me a date with one of the Delaney sisters.
Oh, good Lord. That wraps up Janeway's leadership corner. I mean, it's a deep cut.
Definitely a deep dive into leadership.
But I enjoyed it. Let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. This is a great episode. It's got some really good acting by the villain.
You're talking about Oily G?
Yes. It just comes off so wonderfully believable.
Okay.
Even their principles are questionable. The way Jarrett O'Tell is ready to trade after this whole pontificating speech from Gath or Oily G about how, we violate one. It's the whole fundamentals of our canon of law. It's like, we believe this until we need something.
Until we don't.
So an episode about moral ambiguity, about the duty of the captain, just a great story. And I think a really satisfying ending as well. Definitely a thumbs up.
I give it a thumbs up. I think it's a very good episode. It's got a real sort of Star Trek stereotype of this goofy character that you're supposed to believe is somehow super charming and that he's really, in charge and he's telling you all these positive things. It's too good to be true. And then, it's not, right? That's a very Star Trek-y thing. But they mix into it the thing that's unique to Voyager, which is the clashing of the characters on the ship because of the Maquis. I think this is the unique element that Voyager has over TNG.
Yeah.
I really like that. I also really liked the moment when I thought, B'Elanna this is what she wants. She wants to be Starfleet.
Yes.
This is who she is. Yeah. I really like that too. So definitely thumbs up.
Yeah.
You said you had an alternative name before we wrap up.
This one should have been Hedonicity.
Like synchronicity?
Well, like hedonists, but like the whole society.
I see. Okay.
Wow. I guess that one failed as an alternative.
Yeah, that didn't work for me. I think it should have been Oily G.
Oily G. Oh, man.
Oily G and the lazies. But there's always someone unhappy behind you. Like, you think everything's great and you're in charge, and nope, there's someone behind you ready to betray you.
So yeah, I think that wraps it up for me.
All right, that wraps up Season 1, Episode 10. Come back next week for Episode 11. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on the social medias at ReBingeIt. We're on Threads, YouTube, Instagram, and that thing that used to be called Twitter. And you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.
No, you didn't say the ReBinge Deep Space Nine podcast that time.
I know. I practiced.
I practiced. Priceless.